Hi, I'm Robert Krulwich. Radiolab is supported by IBM. 16 million new-collar jobs will be created by 2024. IBM's new education model gives high school students workplace experience and an associate's degree. 90 P-Tech schools are preparing graduates for tomorrow's STEM careers. Let's put smart to work and find out how at ibm.com/P-Tech. Hi, I'm Robert Krulwich. Radiolab is supported by Capital One, presenting the new Capital One Saver Card. Earn 4% cash back on dining and entertainment, 2% at grocery stores, and 1% on all other purchases. Now, when you go out, you cash in. What's in your wallet?
Oh, wait, you're listening?
Okay.
All right.
Okay. All right.
You're
Listening
to Radiolab.
Radio
From
WNYC.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm Jad Abumrad.
I'm Robert Krulwich.
This is Radiolab.
So, we got an email from you.
Yes, you did.
Yeah.
Not long ago, our editor Soren Wheeler and I, we got into a conversation with this woman.
I live in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Her name is Janelle Jenny.
I like the Packers.
Of course you do.
Yeah. I guess photographer would technically be my job, but I do a whole lot of different things, none of which really pertain to the story at hand, but that's
And our story really starts when Janelle sent an email to the Radiolab inbox basically saying, I need your help.
Yeah.
Something had happened to her that was
Kind of wondrous and unexplainable and very weird.
And as a result, Janelle had found herself stuck in a story told to hundreds of thousands of people all across the country. A story that sits right smack dab in the middle of one of the biggest cultural divides in our country right now. But it was a story that wasn't hers, and she wanted us to help her find a way to finally tell her story.
So to speak. Do you want me to kind of just start
walk me
telling
up.
you? Sure. Well, when I was 18, I went to a concert.
A rock concert.
Yeah, it was a Warp Tour. So it's like a festival of, rock concerts. And
Tons of bands on different stages all over the place. And Janelle is walking around between all the different stages and merchandise tables when she sees this tent.
a 10 by 10 white tent with just a little table in front.
A table with a sign on it that said,
Be a bone marrow donor, sign up to be on the registry, save a life, something like that.
So this was rock music and good deeds brought together.
Essentially, right, which is a pretty good mix in hindsight.
So Janelle read the sign and she thought to herself, I'll sign up.
Sure.
Why not?
Yeah.
Did you know what bone marrow was?
Yeah, I
You
mean,
knew that would mean that they'd take a really long needle
yeah.
and stick it in you and suck out bone stuff?
Yeah, I suppose at that point that was probably not the forethought. I think the altruistic,
the
I'm going to
nice
do something. Yeah, that was probably the main motivation.
And all Janelle had to do standing in front of that tent was sign some papers and swab her cheek, because with a bone marrow donation, they actually have to figure out if you're a genetic match with someone who would receive the donation.
Yeah.
Which was part of what Janelle thought was cool about it.
I always thought that, it would just be an amazing opportunity to be the one person who could do something for somebody that, literally no one else in the world could.
It's a deep kind of connection with someone there.
Yeah, there's, I don't know if either of you are only children, but
I am.
it's, how there's just you have cousins, you've got friends, but at some point there's not that, it sounds so stupid, but that biological connection, besides my parents or whatnot.
You mean that you missed the idea of someone who was muchly like you and muchly in your world and muchly...
Yeah, and also even the kind of the need, somebody out there dependent on me on kind of that almost otherworldly level.
So Janelle swabbed her cheek, signed the paper, and then went about her normal life. And then about 6 months later, she got a call.
Yeah, it was a phone call to my landline. That's how long ago.
Oh, my gosh. So what year are we talking here?
It's 2009.
Okay.
It was a phone call, and I remember very specifically it was a voicemail because I hadn't had the chance to answer it. And they said something to the extent of, hi, we're from the National Bone Marrow Donor Registry. We've done some tests and we've narrowed you down to be a preliminary match for a patient. So we need you to come in and do some further tests that involve, blood and stuff.
Did you think, oh no, I forgot that I did that? Or were you thinking, oh boy, or what were you?
Oh, I overcome with emotion. I remember just to think there's somebody out there that might be my person. So absolutely no hesitation on my end. I went right
So
away.
Janelle heads into the clinic because, so bone marrow, the stuff in the kind of core of your bones, actually produces all your blood cells, and importantly, including your white blood cells, which are a key part of your immune system. So what you're doing with a bone marrow transplant is taking a healthy immune system out of one person and putting it into another person whose immune system is, cancer or messed up in some kind of way. The key is, though, because the immune system is that part of you that recognizes you from not you and attacks anything that's not you, you have to fool the new body into thinking that this immune system is them. And so the parts of your DNA that have to do with your immune system, a couple key parts of that have to match with the donor. So that's what they're doing with Janelle. They're taking her in to test her DNA to see if the stuff that marks out her immune system matches closely enough with this, recipient so that the bone marrow transplant will work.
And then maybe a month later, I get another call, and this one I was able to answer, and they say, well, we've done tests, and you are the ideal person in this 8 million person registry to donate for this patient. You are a perfect match.
Wow.
And will you do it? And I was like, absolutely. So
Does that feel to you like the call of destiny? Like, oh, maybe this was meant to be then?
yeah, I think there's something I feel that's bigger than myself that's happening. And I don't really, I can't really explain it yet at that point, but I know there's okay, there's a big thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I go in, and unfortunately, to disappoint you, Robert, the way that I donated bone marrow wasn't actually the real bad way with the big needle.
I'm not disappointed. I'm grateful for whoever.
Yeah.
Have they come up with a small needle version?
Yeah,
or
what they
a straw or something?
sort of what they essentially do, and this is actually the far more common way of doing it now, is they inject you with all these drugs, and it is 8 injections that boost your white blood cell count up to astronomical heights. And do you know, when you get sick, when your immune system kicks in overdrive and you feel sick, imagine that 8 times over. Just because
nauseous, achy, shaky.
So achy, every bone hurt.
And while Janelle is feeling achy and sick, inside of her bone marrow is pumping out a bunch of new baby blood cells.
Unmatured stem cells that can really become almost anything.
Then they just go in and grab those cells.
They harvest you, I guess. So you have a needle in both arms, and you pretty much sit still for 6 hours till they suck all your blood out of your body, put it in a machine, and give you back what they don't need. So I think they've got about, one of those little IV bags.
Just a quart-sized plastic bag.
Full of my stem cells. And once you're done, they put some Band-Aids on you, and they're like, all right, let us know if you need anything.
And do you know anything about what happens to your blood cells? Who gets it or what?
Yeah, the whole registry is very, very strict about patient confidentiality, but they did tell me that it was a 29-year-old man with acute lymphoblastic leukemia. And that's literally, that's all I knew for a whole year.
Did you look that up in the?
Oh, of course. I did endless Google searches of 29-year-old man, acute lymphoblastic leukemia.
Trying to get a real peek.
Right. I was like, maybe he's worded it that way. And I didn't find anything, of course. But once that year is up, if both parties agree, then we can talk. And that's kind of really interesting because I definitely was looking forward to that year mark. But once that hit, I kind of got cold feet. I really just wasn't ready to know exactly who he was. And then I was also worried that, maybe this guy's like a real piece of crap. Like maybe he's a Klan member or a criminal or something. So there's part of that too.
So you would worry that you'd open up the Sentinel and it would say, formerly ill person robs 3 banks and hits old ladies.
Yeah.
Or something like
Yes.
Horrible man saved by Janelle Jenny.
Right. It's so stupid to say, but I thought that. So I did end up eventually sending this email or whatnot in, I think, about October. It took them a couple weeks to actually give my info to my patient and vice versa.
I was eating lunch with a friend of mine, and I remember having chips and guacamole.
By the way, my patient's name is Jim. So they gave Jim my info.
And my phone went off in my pocket. There was an email in my inbox, and there was a scanned PDF attached to this email, and I opened it up, and she had filled this out with her own hand. And I just broke. I wept like a little baby in a booth at a Mexican restaurant in the middle of Grapevine, Texas. And I got on Facebook. I saw a picture of her, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, it's got to be her."
I'd gotten an email, or not email, it's a Facebook friend request from, said this guy named Jim Monroe in Texas, and I was like, "Oh, okay, I don't know anybody in Texas," and then it clicked all of a sudden. Oh, this is the guy. This is him. I can see his picture. I can look, and
Oh, what does he look like?
not very much like me.
It wasn't Janelle with shorter hair.
No, right? Yeah. Tall,
6'4", I've got blonder hair.
blonde hair. I think fake blonde,
I should say it's dyed right now, but I have like strawberry blonde hair,
but tall, blonde hair, blue-eyed, white guy.
blue eyes. I'm very handsome.
Yeah,
What are you, by the way?
short, blonde-haired, blue-eyed person.
Short, blonde hair,
So I
blonde
guess,
hair.
yeah.
Okay, well,
I guess
so it's,
we could-
you're in the same.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, we could be cousins, I think.
And yeah, so I looked at all of his pictures and his wife, who's a model, and these kids were so adorable, and I tried to find as much as I can. And as far as his profession, I was like, oh, he appears to be some sort of magician. So I guess we'll talk about that later.
So I don't even know, like, I guess, why don't we just find out, like, where you're from and where you were raised, and
Okay.
do it that way.
So I was born in Orange County, California, Fullerton, California. I went to school in Anaheim, high school in Anaheim. I was a baseball player, so I ended up going. I was a very, very good baseball player. I got drafted by at the time they were called the Tampa Bay Devil Rays. Now they're just the Tampa Bay Rays.
Oh, you were that good?
Yeah, I turned down a professional baseball contract to go play at the University of Texas in Austin.
And what did you play?
I was a pitcher. I was a hard-throwing right-hander, and ended up getting, like I said, drafted and went to the University of Texas to play baseball. And that's what I thought I was going to be. I thought I was going to be a professional baseball player. And then my sophomore year of college, I blew out my shoulder. I had a surgery my freshman year, and then came back and was throwing harder than ever. Then did it again. So baseball was kind of over.
Over at, like, 19? Like, that's... Oh.
Yes, sir. Yeah, it was a big kick in the head.
But he finished up school,
They maintained my scholarship as a medical redshirt.
majored in business and psychology,
Yeah.
then moved up to Boulder, Colorado, got married, and had a couple kids.
And one of my really good friends during this time his name was Tennyson, and he became one of my best friends. He wasn't just my best friend, he was like my brother. He was an athlete too, so he was a former college football player. And he had also lost his football career based upon an injury. And then also knew magic and illusion.
And magic was actually something that Jim had been fascinated by ever since he was a kid.
Yeah. I saw a trade show magician when I was 10 or 11. It was at the Anaheim Convention Center, of all places, at an optometric convention. Both of my parents are optometrists. And he was just doing trade show stuff at a booth.
Do you remember what he was doing?
He did a version of this trick called Cards Across. He made a cigarette appear. You got a...
Which he pulled out of your head or out of somebody's...
He just casually holding his hand and was holding a zigzag in the tips of his fingers, and he goes to light it, and there's a puff of smoke, and there's a real cigarette.
And the thought you had at that moment was, I want to do that?
It was, how did he do that? And that is cool. And, I'm going to go learn how that's done. So I just began to look at card tricks and read books on how all this stuff was done to figure out how it was done.
So when you met Tennyson, they started practicing together and doing shows in front of friends and family. And pretty soon...
Sure enough, we start doing gigs. I won't say it, but
They started doing these shows at like schools and festivals and stuff, and they would do these tricks, like a lot of kind of card tricks and number tricks, say where you pick a random number and it would end up, it was written on a piece of paper in the shoe of an audience member or something like that. But then the show would turn into something else, because the thing is, Tennyson was a believer.
overwhelmingly so.
Like believer, like in God, you mean?
Yeah, a Christian.
And Tennyson was very convinced.
And so after an hour or so of magic tricks,
Just pure entertainment.
Tennyson would say to the crowd,
This has been great. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to give you guys a chance to take off. Because during the second part of this show, we're going to talk about what the Christian perspective is and why we believe this Christian thing. If you want to stick around, great. If you don't, take off.
now Jim says during this part of the show,
Tennyson in particularly was way more of the evangelistic piece of this. And I considered myself more of a producer.
now Jim had actually grown up going to church.
Yeah, so I was, my parents went to Lutheran church. I was at one point doing that. But still, there's, at the end of the day, it was just, there was nothing in it that seemed to be satisfying.
And so at this point in the show, Jim would sort of stand back a bit as Tennyson talked about how magic is actually all about the unseen, and behind the veil of reality, there's a God watching over us. And Jim says he would be standing there on stage watching these people in the audience who are feeling this real connection with God.
However, I wasn't having that experience.
He's just like, I don't feel what they're feeling. And he started to think to himself,
I didn't want to be the guy that said, well, I'm a Christian because my friends were, or I'm a Christian because I was raised that way. I want it to be true.
and he just wasn't sure that it was.
Right.
And then after he and Tennyson had been doing this show for a year and a half or so, Jim got a call. Tennyson had been out hiking in the mountains just outside of Boulder, and
He was found in a river.
his body was partially submerged just at the edge of the water at the base of a 40-foot cliff.
In Peaceful Valley is what it was called. No one really knows how he passed away.
It looked like he might have actually fallen from the cliff. The police thought maybe suicide.
But it could be, exposure to the elements, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Jim says he was just, devastated.
Yeah, he's probably the closest male friend I've ever had.
Just felt like he was, in the bottom of a hole.
Yeah. Bottom of a hole, kind of figuring it out. Best friend passes away. My wife and I, as a result, kind of got into this really strange season where, I'm depressed, she's depressed. We're pretty much on the verge of calling it quits. And then my leg starts hurting really badly.
Where in the leg?
Underneath my right knee.
Jim says he started popping Advil every day, at first just a couple, then more and more.
And I'm trying to gut it out.
Then he came home one day and he says the pain was so bad he couldn't even get out of his car. And so his wife was like, look, we're going to the hospital now.
And I'm sitting there in an emergency room, and this man walks into my room and he looks at me and he says, you have cancer.
Jim had leukemia, which is cancer of the blood cells.
So the white blood cells inside of your bone marrow have literally exploded out of control. And the reason why your leg hurts so bad is because your bone is breaking on its own.
From the inside.
Wow.
And he said, if you don't do anything, you're going to die in 2 months.
Just before Christmas of 2008, Jim checks into the hospital, and right away they do two things. One, they put Jim on the bone marrow registry in the hopes that he can find a donor. And two, just to keep him alive while he waits, they start putting him through round after round of chemo.
And get this wicked concoction of stuff and then be let out.
He loses his hair, his body starts to fall apart.
And all you can do at that point is just hope,
Like tick tock, tick tock, tick tock.
Tick tock, tick tock, yeah. Yep. That's when you think you know what you believe to be true. Is in adversity. That's when you find out. And so for me, it was not a Christian worldview. If there is an all-loving, omnipotent, powerful being that makes the universe go round, then why would things like, suicide or murder or rape exist in this constructed world of his?
Jim just couldn't get himself to believe in the existence of a God like that, or really any God.
There wasn't any rhyme or reason or purpose. It's just, this is my lot. This really sucks.
And then when he was at his lowest point,
I remember driving back to Houston, Texas for more chemo, and my phone rang, and I didn't recognize the number, and I said hello, and this woman on the other line, she said, there's one person that we've been able to identify on the planet. Out of all the databases, everything, there's one.
You are the ideal person in this 8 million person registry to donate for this patient.
Think about that. This is in the world.
You are a perfect match. Will you do it? And I was like, absolutely.
My wife and I were in the car together, and it was just tears. You know, it's like, wow, that's amazing.
So April 20th, and this is important to remember, April 20th was when I donated.
and as they were pulling the cells out of Janelle's body up in Wisconsin,
You know, one of those little IV bags full of my stem cells.
down in Texas, Jim's doctors were telling him,
your bone marrow transplant is scheduled for April 23rd. On April 23rd, the nurses, they come inside of your room to celebrate your second birth. And then I remember Dr. Gerard telling me, are you ready to put your boxing gloves on? But what he was preparing me for was a death. Come to find out later on, they pulled my wife out of my room and they said, we're going to give this to him with all this medication. He could potentially receive this and reject this violently and pass away.
because remember, they're essentially replacing Jim's immune system with somebody else's, in this case, Janelle's. And in a very real way, they're replacing that part of Jim that determines who he is with someone who he clearly isn't. And so there's a real chance that the body will just short circuit.
So they give this drug, the nurses nicknamed Shake and Bake.
It's designed to basically wipe out whatever is left of Jim's immune system, his white blood cells.
Put it inside of your IV, and your body just starts convulsing.
And then they put Janelle's cells in.
And they monitored me.
And over the next couple weeks, Janelle's cells enter Jim's body. They get into his bone marrow and they start producing new white blood cells. It's basically producing a whole new immune system. And eventually, Jim is cancer-free.
I mean, it's literally like new life, you know? Now, I will say this. Some bells kind of began to go off in my head a little bit.
Jim says before he even got the transplant, his doctor had come into his room and told him,
You're going to be like a baby inside your mother's womb, literally being born again. Because on April 23rd, and once again, this is their terminology, there's someone else that's going to be living on the inside of you. And this new system of blood is going to be your life. Why is that interesting? You know, April 23rd, my new birthday is April 23rd. My old birthday, it's April 20th. My new birthday is on April 23rd. That's on the third day.
And on the third day is significant because of the biblical echo.
The biblical echo. Yeah. I came back from whatever I was in because of the only blood on planet Earth that could save me in my disease. So you know,
does this land on you the way?
From whatever I was in because of the only blood on planet Earth that could save me in my disease. So you know,
does this land on you the way it sounds to me like it lands on you now, or did you go through a like what happened? Like
those words, those words in particularly, bells went off in my head.
but does that mean that you now suddenly believe in God again, or for the first time? Or
I mean, it's a process, right? You follow, and then I think the puzzle pieces are kind of all swirling and coming together. But everything changed on that demarcating day, April 23rd.
all thanks, obviously, to Janelle. And not long after they got each other's information and saw each other on Facebook, they hopped on a phone call.
So she gets on, and I get on, but it's all kind of like, hey, oh my gosh, this is crazy. I cannot believe this. Isn't this nuts? Yeah, this is so crazy. And then she drops this on me. She said, I went and got a tattoo of a jigsaw puzzle piece on the very spot where they stuck that IV in my arm to pull out the new blood, knowing that I was the missing piece in someone else's life, and without me, that person wouldn't be alive. And I said, I was thinking, do you have a ton of tattoos? And she said, no, I have one. You know what Christians believe to be true, right?
what?
Is that their Savior rolled up and showed them the very spot on his body where blood came out so that they would believe.
So you're just
You can't
going
write
down
this
this
stuff,
road.
right?
You're driving like at 100 miles an hour towards this.
For me, it was like I was being introduced to a person. There was an experiential understanding of that which was going on behind the scenes of this existence that was answering my prayer.
The prayer is called "Are You There?" That's the prayer.
Yep.
Are you there, God?
Yep.
Basically, Jim saw Janelle and her donation to him as almost more than just allegory, as like something close to a literal proof of the existence of God, like a very real, very present sign.
I told her that we need to meet. I said, can I please bring you out to Dallas, Texas?
He said, I have to bring you to Texas, which is my nightmare. I'm just kidding. But absolutely, I wanted to go right into it.
I remember her tone. She's like, yeah, sure. Super excited. So yes, I flew her to Dallas, Texas.
Mike's camera action is coming down.
I actually recorded it.
Somebody you met. This girl saved my life. Oh, really? Yeah, that's awesome.
In the video, you see Jim sort of standing at the bottom of this escalator in the Dallas-Fort Worth airport. He's, looking pretty thin and pale and nervous. And then the camera turns, and there's Janelle.
Hi.
Coming down the escalator.
Sorry, like the last one. Hi.
And they hug. And then his kids come up.
Hi, can I hug too? Aw, you're so cute. Yeah.
And eventually his wife.
So nice to meet you.
Okay, so now you go home.
We go to his
To
house.
his home.
Right, and he lives in a very big house outside of Dallas.
They had dinner with the family, and then, once everybody else was kind of heading off to bed, Jim and Janelle started to talk.
And I think, if I remember correctly, we were just outside by the pool and just talking and figuring out who each other was. And, I was like, so, magician? What is that? And he started telling me about what kind of magician he really is. And he is a Christian magician.
I'm sure that her mind, she's thinking, oh my gosh, I just saved a Christian magician from Texas's life. I was like, joke's on me. Isn't that wonderful,
When we come back, Janelle becomes Jim's greatest magic trick.
So don't go away.
Drew Downey from Daphne, Alabama. Radiolab is supported in part by the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation, enhancing public understanding of science and technology in the modern world. More information about Sloan at www.sloan.org.
Hi, I'm Robert Krulwich. Radiolab is supported by GiveWell. This time of year, many people want to give back, but it's hard to know where your donation will do the most good. GiveWell was founded by dedicated donors who wanted to answer this hard question. Their team does in-depth, detailed research to identify evidence-backed, cost-effective programs helping the poorest people in the world. Since GiveWell's launch, it has helped more than 60,000 donors give confidently and has directed over $300 million to the charities it recommends. Visit givewell.org to learn how you can do the most good with your donation. Hi, I'm Robert Krulwich. Radiolab is supported by Rocket Mortgage by Quicken Loans, introducing their all-new Rate Shield approval. So, if you are in the market to buy a home, Quicken Loans will lock your rate up for 90 days while you shop. To get started, go to rocketmortgage.com/Radiolab. Rate Shield approval is only valid on certain 30-year purchase transactions. Additional conditions or exclusions may apply based on Quicken Loans data in comparison to public data records. Equal housing lender, licensed in all 50 states, NMLS, consumeraccess.org, number 3030.
When you fall for opera, you fall hard. It's not really because of the plots, the sets, or the spectacle of it all. It's because of these little perfect moments, the arias. I'm Rhiannon Giddens. The Aria Code is a new podcast that reveals the magic of opera, one aria at a time. You may not understand the words, but I guarantee you'll feel them. Listen to Aria Code wherever you get your podcasts.
Okay, we're back. I'm Jad Abumrad.
I'm Robert Krulwich. This is Radiolab.
And, okay, well, let's return to a story from Soren Wheeler. So, Soren, you left us in the backyard. They were about to talk, right?
Yep, sitting in Jim's backyard by the pool, and he's basically telling her his whole story about his sort of loss of faith and the cancer and how she saved his life. And then he tells her that right after she saved him, he started doing the magic show again, that show that he used to do with Tennyson.
And the show is called The Maze.
My name is Jim Monroe. This is The Maze.
So we actually got to see Jim's show, and I have to say, he's a pro. It's an impressive production. He gets big venues.
Over here, ready to have some fun tonight.
Usually 1,000 people or so. There's crazy laser light show stuff. And he does these really complicated illusions that are sort of half Penn and Teller, half David Blaine.
Like, for example, picking a random phone number out of the phone book.
4700.
And it ends up being someone in the audience.
And then their phone will end up like hidden somewhere.
Something like that. And they're very good.
So Jim is telling Janelle about all these tricks. But then he says...
The second half of the show is about us.
He explains that the magic show at this point ends. He tells people they can leave if they want to. And he starts to talk openly, confessionally to the audience.
Where I quickly found out that I had cancer.
In very personal terms about what happened to him.
So my wife and I raced down to MD Anderson Cancer Center.
And at a certain point, he shows a video.
Been off chemo now, but they say that the stuff in the chemo is really starting to kick in. Because I can't keep anything down.
He's in the hospital.
My mouth is super dry.
Throwing up into a bucket, and he's pale, thin, huge circles under his eyes. And then he explains that right when he was on the edge of death,
That at his lowest point, this thing happened.
a miracle happened.
There is one person, just one.
When his blood was literally poisoning his own body, somebody substituted their blood on his behalf so he could be reborn, I guess.
Blood on your behalf so that you can live again.
3 days after his birthday,
On the third day, I came back from the dead. It's the only blood on the planet that can save me my disease.
so there's a whole 3 days thing there, which is the story of Easter and the rebirth. It's just, I mean, he sees this as like definitive proof that there's a God.
I am either the statistical anomaly that continues to propagate this false ideology about supernaturalism and miracles and all that stuff. I'm either that statistical anomaly that's so wild that it's like being bitten by a shark and struck by lightning at the same time, twice in the same lifetime. Or you might have to believe what I believe is true, and that is there is something bigger going on behind the scenes, and his name is Jesus.
So yes, this is all being thrown at me.
And is he saying all this to you by the pool? Is it all comes tumbling out?
Yeah.
And how are you feeling inside?
Stranger and stranger, going down the wormhole because I am an atheist. In the sense that I don't believe in the tenets of Christianity. I don't believe really in the tenets of any established religion I've ever seen. Honestly, I just think that once things are labeled and you're pigeonholed, and the exclusivity of really any religion is the cause for a lot of problems throughout history. But faith can be beautiful, and there's definitely parts of me and there's moments in my life that, boy, praying and really feeling like that was going out to somebody would feel great. But I just can't. I just can't do it. So at that moment, he's telling me this, and he's like, well, you're here in Texas for this weekend, and would you be willing to come on stage for one of my shows so I can introduce you? And of course I said yes.
Really?
And
Of course you said yes?
yeah, of course. I've always kind of looked at our story as something bigger than what he believes, than what I don't believe. It's bigger. It's capital B, underline bold. It's big.
Partly because Jim, at every show, he has the bone marrow registry people right there ready to sign folks up.
And because of the show they just saw, he can get hundreds. I know that dozens of people have gone on to be matches.
Wow.
So this was truly the culmination of, from the moment I signed up to be on that registry, this felt like the zenith of this entire thing.
So, next night,
At Texas Christian University, packed house.
Janelle's in the audience.
I was in like the front row.
And during the second part of the show, when Jim goes through the rebirth part, he stops and he says, "Guess what, everyone? That person who saved my life, she's here."
He has me walk up on stage. Crowd went wild. The first time in my life I got a standing ovation.
Because you're Jesus.
Yes.
That's why the crowd goes crazy. It's because
Yes. Yeah. All of these kids in the audience, who are all pretty much my age as well at that point, are seeing my being on stage as quite possibly the biggest proof they've ever had that there is a God.
Was there any part of you that said, I shouldn't be here, or were you all there?
There was a part of me that felt a little bit of an imposter.
But for Janelle, she says that feeling was outweighed just by the number of people that were lining up at the bone marrow donation table. And so the next time she had a chance, she did it again. And again. And again. She's now appeared at the end of the show around a dozen times, all around the country, playing the role of Jim's personal savior. And she says the more times she did it, the more that feeling, that sort of fraud feeling, kept popping up. Each time a little bit louder.
Yeah. There's parts of me, there's little fibers in my being that are like, wow, if this is a sign, if there is a God, I'm a real jerk. This is such a beautiful and really literal story being told to me about like, hey, maybe there is a God.
She says she started to feel that, like, if she's both perpetuating that story and
refusing it, there's a special place in hell for me.
And this is why Janelle got in touch with us, because she wanted us to help her figure out a way to tell a story that let her way of seeing the world into the room.
Okay, is everyone there?
I'm here.
Jim, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you guys. Janelle, can you hear me?
I can.
How are you?
So our producer, Latif Nasser, actually started talking to Janelle about what exactly she wanted to do. And they decided that we should just all get in the studio, Jim and her and all of us, and see if we could hash it out.
Okay.
But I guess, Janelle, do you want to just kind of talk through what we've been thinking?
Oh, sure. I can try. And if you want to help me, Latif. So,
Sure.
Essentially, Latif and I have been talking about what would be the best way for me to kind of tell my side of the story, my side of our story, so to speak, without so much of the religious stuff.
Yeah, so when are you guys going to do that?